I don't know. Can you hear us? Sid, can you hear us?
Should have.
Doug, can you hear us? Doug, can you hear us?
The Verizon guy.
He's talking.
He's talking.
We can't hear
No, we
you.
can't hear him.
Sid or Doug, can you hear us?
I can now after I left and you rejoined.
Doug, can you hear us?
Motion for a rare meeting restart.
Anybody have Doug's phone number?
I don't, well, maybe I can send an email.
Doug, I don't know if you can hear us, but maybe if you sign off and sign back in again, that worked for Sid, maybe it worked for you.
I don't have his email address.
His email address,
Yeah.
Doug,
I can email him and find him.
WBA Homes.
Maybe they must have disabled the chat feature. Usually there's a chat, we post a message, but it doesn't seem to be available. So I sent him a message, I don't know if he's gonna get it.
All right, well, we'll know for the record that Sid is here. He or she just off screen.
It was, yeah. Doug is there, there we go.
Oh, there you go, Doug just signed out, so.
Sid, can you still hear us?
I can, yep.
So maybe Doug, either signing back in again or trying
Give
to.
Doug a minute to sign back in.
When you get here.
While we were waiting for that, I'll get the file.
For receiving an alternate,
What happened?
are we seating anyone alternate?
Here, we're gonna see, let's see all three. Congratulations, we'll have a party afterwards. Wait, Ryan, it's.
So can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Doug, congratulations, you're seated tonight along with your fellow alternates.
Okay.
We went to the roll call and we noted, Doug, that you were here and Sid was here, so. We designated the alternates, and that brings us to the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Number two, the chair's report. I'll give Dr. Gordon his usual thanks to staff and commission members and the public for attending and helping with the town's important work. And since there isn't much of a chair's report, I'd like to tell a dirty story. The dirty story is 2 white horses fell in a mud puddle. And that brings us to item number 3, which is Airbnb regulations. And I'd like to give the floor to Delia Fay. And Delia has some stuff that she sent to us all, and I guess we'll go through it and see if we can't come to some kind of agreement on some stuff. Delia, take it away.
So this is the draft. It was based on the Ashford regulation. Some of it didn't make sense. So, we can go over that. And, I can file with the printout on my desk. But anyway, I cut and pasted, and I can pull up the other file if you wanna show it, you can show it. You can go back and forth if you want. Or we can just look at what I've drafted.
The other file being the Ashford,
Right.
okay.
So what we have here. In Article 2, we currently have a definition of bed and breakfast, and then in red, that's how I show text amendments, I show. What you're proposing is new text in bold red, and if you're proposing it to be something to be deleted, I have a line through it. So right now, the red text is from the Ashford sample. And so if you decided that you wanted to make this amendment, we would have to delete the current definition. So we would be putting a line through it if that's what you decide to do. And then the text amendment would involve adding these new definitions and deleting the current definition. So I have comments on the side. I don't know if you had a chance to review the file that I emailed out. I apologize, it was yesterday, but I worked on it as fast as I could. So my first comment is, I'm not sure it's clear when it says a designated agent within 2 hours. Is that clear? Within, I guess, within contact or within, you're expecting them to,
The fourth.
the definition.
Short-term rental. Which, you on this paper here, David?
Oh, that one. I'm looking at the wrong center.
Should be the same thing.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
If you think it's clear enough, then I'll just delete the comment, or we can figure out how to fix it. While we're thinking about this, I just wanted to share that there is an event for, probably mostly for town attorneys specifically on short-term rentals, and it's on Friday, June 16th, and I'm going to it in New Haven. So I don't know if you want to wait until after that, we have the, interesting information to share that might save us time.
I would suggest leaving it for right now, since Ashford obviously went through this and they saw some reason before wording it like this.
But do we know that 2 hours, I mean, 2 hours from that location? Or 2 hours from time to check in?
It does say 2 hours of the rental property,
Right.
so
Do we need any kind of a motion to do that?
to do what?
Wait until after you attend that meeting?
I don't think so.
Okay.
This is just in the discussion.
Okay.
And so when you guys finally come to the concluding your drafting it, you'll make a decision whether you want to actually do the amendment or not. And then I have to go through all the notices and all that stuff to have the public hearing.
Okay.
Which is a whole formal, right now we're informal, we're just discussing options.
Thank you.
And I didn't want to skip too quickly over bed and breakfast, because we had some discussion about what does the meal mean? I don't know if we want to spend a little time making sure there's a little clarity about prepared meals, or as opposed to prepackaged meals, microwave oven. I kind of went through some of that, snacks in a basket, is that a meal? So we don't have to do it right now. It's just thinking that that was something that we stumbled over. And we maybe just want to clear it up so we're better prepared for it. Application.
Be fine with putting prepared in front of it. I've only stayed at 2 bed and breakfasts, but they've always been a cooked meal. when I-
Yeah. Right, but cooked, prepared meal by the host.
Yeah. Got 2 kids home from college now, it's kind of like my house.
So,
So do we want to add that as the first step, like,
and
you
the
just said,
definition, the proposed red definition,
on the proposed red definition?
like before meals, you would add prepared meals.
Prepared meals by, owner. Okay, that's a good
Or
start.
meals prepared by owner,
Yeah, give us the meal.
or a
prepared
draw
by
that
owner
provides the
or
meals.
trade. Yes.
Yep.
Prepared by-
Yep.
and show them in something different so we can keep track of what changes were made today.
And while you're looking at that, there were other definitions that you may want to include that were part of one of the other hand, the Connecticut chapter of American Planning Association, tell you that he had sent out a while back to try and deal with perhaps future platforms where we just wanted to describe VRBO. To make sure that that's in the definitions of vacation rental by owner, short-term and long-term rentals, home away. Another term that's used.
Is VRBO the name of the company, kind of like Airbnb is the name of the.
Yeah,
you know, when They don't manage the individual property,
No, but they manage the rentals and.
they would coordinate the
Coordinator.
event. There must be a way they define it. But anyway, VRBO is another one of these companies or one of these entities. I don't know that we need to define them because there could be, I don't know, 20 of them.
well,
You
you're
just
right,
define
they
the-
could expand.
Because when you leave one of them out, say, that doesn't apply to me.
Well, true. defining Airbnb or not using that as a definition anymore?
Well, I think we're defining
Not
bed and breakfast, not Airbnb. We're defining a bed and breakfast.
Right, so that's one type of business.
That's just one type of short-term rental.
Right,
We're not dealing with, Airbnb is a company that you register through. that you rent through. Bed and breakfast is just
it's a business.
the business that family owns a house with a couple extra bedrooms and they host people.
Okay, so when somebody's going to rent their house either through Airbnb or VRBO or HomeAway, how will we be defining it in the regulations?
I don't think you need to define the name of that business that you reserve your space for. I
Right.
think you define the short-term rental. That's when you're defining the thing that they are using that platform to promote.
Okay,
We define what their business is, not how they promote it, how they rent it out.
If they could come up with another name like Joe's Short Stay, and then we would say, well, that wasn't on the list, so now Joe's Short Stay gets the.
okay, I'm just trying to connect it to our definitions. So that there's a way to say, HomeAway is,
Rental. Short-term rental, it doesn't matter what name they give it.
I get that. But they may not say that they're a short-term rental business. I'm just trying to
But they
connect
don't
it.
say it. It's whether the definition covers what they're doing,
Okay,
like in
all
all.
right,
when
we're
you
on
have
different wavelengths, but
Like when
okay,
we have-
we'll go with,
Retail.
Yeah.
We don't have to list all the stores that we have in town. We have manufacturing, we have to list all the names of all the manufacturers. So I think that's the same thing.
Okay.
So we ready to move on to the definition of short-term rental? In the Ashford example, their definitions include short-term rental, short-term hosted, and short-term rental unhosted. But I didn't see anywhere in their regulation, anything about those two kinds, the hosted and the unhosted. I didn't see a difference in the permit, a difference in where you can put them. Although, well, I think there was a difference in where I think you could have an unhosted in a different place than the hosted. But it was very confusing as to why they broke it down that way.
I'm confused. with Short-term rental fund hosted. The 2 hours are. Designated agent has to be there, would they check in within 2 hours? 2 hours.
I thought it meant that they had to be within two, like, they have to be available within 2 hours of distance. Or driving distance. But that's what I thought wasn't clear.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Within 2 hours of when they show up, within 2 hours, like 2 hours before, 2 hours after, that 2 hours after they leave, that they have to be within 2 hours of the location,
I think it sounds like,
and what if they take the weekend off? So, in
think
that
what-
one weekend, something happens, and then who enforcing zoning is gonna keep track of all of this stuff?
I just think what it means is that they want somebody in the area in case something.
So, but I don't
So
think
within
it's
2 hours.
written, it's clear,
No, it's not very clear. I think that's the intention.
so how can we make it clear?
I think another main part of it too is a lot of places, their sole business is running Airbnbs. They'll be out in California, they'll buy up a bunch of properties, all they list people with Airbnbs, and that prevents that.
But they can still have an agent, a property manager, that
They-
could be
They
managing.
could, but at least then there's somebody there that if they do get a complaint, there's somebody within a reasonable driving distance, because they have that problem on OD already. With that corporate company buying a house.
So that's why I'm trying to determine how we should, what words we should add to make it 2 hours leave. Within 2 hours distance of the property? Driving distance, or
That's why I would take it, I don't know how
to
to
be accessible,
Has to be
Enforce that
available-
at all.
Has to be available within 2 hours. However, yeah,
and that's, I don't think we have a zoning officer. was when they, if they need a permit to do an MD, they would have to provide the name of the person, and then the person's address. Yes. But, you know, if someone looks on Google to figure out if it's 2 hours away. Because 2 hours and 15 minutes, someone's gonna check.
Don't trip your body off.
So maybe we can say we need an agent that's registered with it, that's they register with the application. So that if something goes wrong and somebody comes to town and complains, that we can contact that. It's just that the tech agent has to be address. And stuff that, so we know who the agent is.
Maybe you don't talk about the 2 hours and just say the designated agent responsible for the property.
I think the 2 hours is a good point to have them within access of the rental property within a certain time period. That if something goes wrong.
The rich Robert can have an idea of how to word it better.
You can take out the 2 hours and make it that distance. 70-mile radius or something like that. Make it easier to figure out than the driving down.
Within
Still-
2 hours of
still just
access
the
time
same.
of the rental property.
I'm inclined to ask Rich how he can define it.
We're gonna run these through Rich anyway. At some point.
So is there a way you wanted to write it, or should you just list a question here for him?
Here's the question to Rich.
I do agree that we should have something in there.
But the dean says it was a mileage thing, pretty cut and dry, it's a fine thing. So. Wow. So, all right,
So right now, your bed and breakfast requires a home occupation. And so you'd have to propose a text limit to take out that language and then add language for whatever permit you're gonna require for your short-term rental. You're gonna keep bed and breakfast and short-term rental. I think they're very confusing to me anyway. You could do that, you'd keep both definitions, and then you would keep something in the regulations about which permit you're requiring and for which type of rental. So right now, in your Article 3 districts, Section B, Community District, subsection 2, permitted uses. You already have the text in black. And I'm proposing that if you're taking bed and breakfast out as being allowed as a permitted use, that's where you would delete that, but there's a red line through it. And if you're proposing, because this was drafted based on Ashford requires a special permit, but that's why I drafted it this way. So I, in the section on community district special permitted uses, I added R for rental, and then I took out the stuff that Ashford has, because I'm showing what they have that doesn't work for us. And then in your townwide requirements and standards, I added a section for short-term rental, and I took the stuff out of the Ashford example that I thought was a standard that should be listed here.
bed and breakfast, that's explained right in here, with property owner on premises. But then, like Delia says, with short-term rental, and then a short-term rental hosted and short-term rental unhosted. It's like. You could get rid of, take out the short-term rental. And just, if you're gonna have short-term hosted and unhosted. But a short-term hosted. Is, I don't know whether that's bed and breakfast or it's hosted. It's
Well,
something.
if you don't serve meals, it's not a bed and breakfast. because
Right,
There's no breakfast.
that's true. So they could be there not serving meals, so that'd be short term.
You could get rid of bed and breakfast and just that include that under short-term posted. Whether they serve breakfast or not
It's up to them.
is up to them.
I think whether they serve breakfast is not a big detail, like, to me, Airbnb seems like the modern way of doing it. Maybe because of COVID, people stopped having so much interaction with their hosts. Maybe it'll go back to that, I don't know, now that you don't have to be so isolated. Anyway, with the Ashford definition. I forgot to go over the rest of my comments. So. Up here, so back to the definition of short-term rental unhosted, it includes. So it says the residential dwelling unit not occupied by the owner of record at the time of the rental is represented by a designated agent within 2 hours of the rental property. That is offered as an accommodation for transient guests no more than 3 times during any 6-month period. My comment, which you can see on the right side, not that's big enough to read there. When saying why limit it to 3 times? Who's going to keep track of this? Who's going to enforce it? What's the penalty for exceeding this limit? Does it then require a different kind of permit or simply is it in violation? Violations are time consuming and difficult, if not additionally expensive to enforce. Also, since Woodstock has limited enforcement staff, perhaps the planning and zoning commission should take that into account when drafting new regulations. So if you're allowing them to have an unhosted short-term rental, do you need to limit it to 3 times? I mean, why does that matter? How are we not supposed to know when they do it?
I don't understand if it's one guest 3 times, or if it's 3 times in a 6-month period to do 3 different
But
guests.
the house can be rented 3 times in a 6 month or rented the same person.
Doesn't
3
matter.
times. Yeah, it's
I'm
right.
gonna say, why do we even care about? any
Doesn't
of
matter.
that?
But it runs the same person.
So. As long as the people don't stay there for more than 28 days or whatever it is. Why do we even care how many times they do it?
Yeah, I personally, I don't think that,
As a former zoning officer, I don't know how I would ever know.
I would just strike it all out.
The staff has too much to do to keep track of how often someone's renting up their space. And if you make it a rule, you have to, if you make it a regulation, you have to enforce it, otherwise. It's ridiculous.
Well, if it's a rule and the applicant attests to the fact that they're abiding by the rules, then it becomes a responsibility on their part to abide by the rules. Now, they can break the rule, and people do that all the time, so with or without a CEO, people either comply or don't comply. So I think it's important to have some kind of limit, even if the feeling is we don't have enough staff right now, that there's a responsibility put on the applicant to test that they're saying they understand the rules and they're gonna follow the rules.
Well, I would hope that they would follow the rules. I'm just saying the rules should be reasonable. I think it's not reasonable, and I think it's highly unlikely anyone's gonna limit themselves to 3 times a year or to a 6-month period.
The only thing I could speculate is that Ashford was worried about a lot of transient turnover.
That doesn't mean that what Ashford had made any sense.
I'm sorry,
It doesn't mean what we got from Ashford made any sense.
And Ashford,
maybe not for us, but maybe for Ashford.
and Ashford is close enough to Yukon where maybe they're trying to avoid have students.
Moving in and out.
Because the limit is 28 days, so
Right.
basically they're saying in a 6-month period, you can't rent your house out for more than 3 months. So you can do 3 28-day rentals in a 6-month period. So I think maybe they're trying to. 3 months and get through a semester. Once. But anyway, I don't. No, they're
So
not.
what's the harm if someone does it for 4 times,
Yeah,
for 10
I'm
times?
not arguing with you, I'm just saying
Or does
that's,
it get?
Those are some of the issues that we have. Dave brings up a good point. It's even, 30 years ago when I bought my house, it was rented by UConn students. People lived in Orange, Connecticut, and they used to rent it out in the off season. And there was, UConn students there. Now, there wasn't any issues. But, we have different lake districts within the town, and most of them are private. So this brings up a whole different, perspective. Because now you have private associations. And now you have bed and breakfasts moving into them. Those really aren't residents. So then not having a police force in town. Or having limited capability of enforcement in town. To enforce rules and regulations, where does that leave us in the long run? With nonconformists? Does that make any sense to you?
I think there's no point in having regulation if you know that you can't enforce it. You anticipate that you can't, because either you have a revolving door of zoning officers.
Right.
Or your zoning officers are limited to just a couple hours a week.
In my conversations with Troop D, they use, they have limited resources for troopers and they gotta cover over 200 square miles of territory. So if you have people that are not obeying the rules and regulations that are set forth by the homeowner, the landowner, what's the recourse? And then, discussing in getting a landowner out within so many hours or within so many mile radius to take care of the situation. What are they gonna do?
I don't know what you mean by. You said something about if the person, the renter is not abiding by the homeowner's rule.
By any rules, by the planning and zoning rules, by the. That's not.
But the homeowner's rules are the town's rules.
Correct.
The homeowner says, this is the rule you have to go by.
So if they violate the zoning regulations, forget about the property owner, they can deal with their own rules. But if they violate the zoning regulations, it's up to the zoning officer to go through those. Notice violation and then the cease and desist, and then the town so wishes, can take them to court. Or maybe the person could even appeal it to the ZBA, but. Is that practical about when it's limited to the number of times? If we're talking about bigger issues. Like, I don't know, there could be bigger issues than whether they do it 4 versus 3 times a year. But they don't. I don't know. I can't really give you an example. I've stayed in short-term rentals with like 30 people because my family used to go on features. And we've never had a problem even with so many people. And we're huge houses and we took over the whole thing. But, so I can't really picture what kind of problem, maybe just weren't party or I can't think of any problems that could have were examples, but whether it's 3 times or 4 times or 20 times, I don't know if that's the thing you have to have a limit on.
Well, part of this issue came up because there were neighbors who saw something unregulated taking place. And sometimes that's what you rely on in a town is if you don't have the regulations, the town can't enforce anything. If you have the regulations and you don't have adequate CEO coverage, that's understandable, but at least you have the regulations that can be investigated if neighbors see something that's outside the regulations. Then that specific instance can be investigated by the CEO. So having some regulations, I think, are important, even if your feeling is there's not enough time or manpower, which I agree, to enforce them all on a. So I'm in favor of having some of the regulations.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have any regulations, but we're specifically talking about the 3 times in 1 period.
I understand. Saying there's no enforcement capability.
They're also saying what difference does it make?
Well, I think we should have the regular, even if there's gonna be difficult enforcement. Hopefully we'll just set a pattern and most people are gonna follow the rules. There's always gonna be people, they're not gonna follow the rules no matter what they are and what the enforcement is. There's always gonna be people that are not. So I think we should set some regulations in good faith. So that people can rent out, so there's some kind of guidance. When you rent a short-term rental, there's always a list of rules that. Rental, you know, no noise after 10 o'clock. You know, no noise before, you know, don't do this before 8 o'clock, no parties, there's a list of regulations. We do, most people follow, does everybody know? But. That's another regulatory thing within the system that. Does that, so I mean, we're just kind of set some guidelines. Hopefully the homeowner. the Companies that they rent through have other regulations too.
I understand, so we divide the issue into capability of enforcement separate from the number of times it's rented, two separate things. Whether the number is 3 or 4 or 10 or whatever, what difference does it make?
Oh, I have no problem with that, I don't think we should not make regulations as we can enforce. Because it's difficult to enforce. So I agree, limiting them to 3 28-day rentals or 3 rentals in 6 months doesn't make sense. But I don't know why they did that. Maybe they had, you know, we don't know the reasoning behind the rules. But I'm just saying, don't want to not make regulations because they're difficult to enforce, or you won't know what they're doing or not. We're going to make regulations and assume and hope people will follow.
I would tend to believe that. You're punching all of you. There are a lot of places. My job allows me to drive down.
So do we want to eliminate that clause, that is offered on an accommodation for transient guests no more than 3 times during the 6-month period? If that's what we're.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Eliminating it. Eliminate.
We just take from, put a period after guests and take no more than 3 times during the 6 months. That makes sense.
Yeah, to just take out that. After within 2 hours of rental property, take that whole last sentence out. That is offered as an accommodation for transient guests no more than 3 times, that whole sentence can come out.
You don't want to keep the part about how it's a combination of transient death.
That's,
They're right up to transient guests.
no, well, that,
You can still have the management person.
yes, but stop it after within 2 hours of the rental property.
Okay, that's fine.
And then that is offered accommodation for transient guests no more than 3 times, that's that,
Makes
that,
short term, don't mention it's transient.
because it's the short-term rental definition up above is 28 consecutive days. And they just want to have a representative with 2 hours of property. And they're saying the property that is offered is a accommodation for transient guests no more than 3 times, it's a poorly written sentence.
It's just redundant based on the other definition.
Okay,
Yeah.
so is that what everybody would like to do?
Stop it after within 2 hours of the rental property, and then that whole 2 hour thing is another question.
So is that what everybody would like to do?
It's fine.
Can you see people on two? Can you see other people? Well,
Still there.
Doug and Sid? Did you want to say anything?
I'm all set with what they're proposing.
Sid? Want to make sure we remember to give you guys opportunity to comment.
I'm a bit absent-minded, so if you just have something to say, just shout it out.
Are these gonna be defined as businesses? No.
Guess that's the question. My next thing, I didn't think about this before, but now that the next definition is transient guests. Person who occupies a room in a hotel or motel, as well as a bed and breakfast, short-term rental, less than 31 days. 31's on the same as 28. Doesn't it say 28? above?
Yes, it does.
So is there like a no man's land between 29, 30, and 31 days?
Well, I have 28 days. Is full.
We change one of them so that they're consistent.
Yes, it should.
Which number do you want? So 31 will change to 28.
I'm okay with that.
So the normal black text, that's what you have now. That's where, if you're gonna go with the Ashford example, we're deleting bed and breakfast to the permitted use in the community district and changing it to add the uses allowed by special permit in the community district for term rental. So now we need a special permit. So that tells me, I'm not sure if you're keeping bed and breakfast, what do you need for a bed and breakfast? So this is where I'm trying to take what we have and what Ashford has and figure out what you want to do if you're melding them together. So if you wanted to keep bed and breakfast and still allow the home occupation to go and take out the strikeout and just leave that alone.
In my mind, the bed and breakfast could be a home occupation, because that is a home, still a small scale. And then. So if that stayed as a home occupation, the other rentals. Aren't necessarily a home occupation because it's not at their home, they may live somewhere else.
Except for the hosted.
Yeah, you could group the,
So make
I would group the hosted in the bed and breakfast. You can post it out.
So maybe the definition of bed and breakfast could go away, the definition of short-term rental hosted would include bed and breakfast. And then it's up to the person to decide whether they may include or not.
So that would be not necessarily require a special permit.
So if you wanted to continue to allow the home occupation, I would take out the strikeout that removes it, and you could leave it that way.
Just don't, I think if we have a lot of special permits, because then they're there and they don't go away, they stay with the property.
Right.
So
If it's a home
and
occupation,
the permit expires after 5 years and after we apply. Special permit, once you're done, it's there. And then it's there, for the land. So I think maybe we, somebody's under the, the home occupation. Then they have to renew them every 5 years, get a chance to review
and if there's been a lot of issues
it. Then
with it, it may not get renewed.
Yeah.
Or special permit.
it's hard to get rid of it.
And currently bed and breakfast get the non-residential zoning, right? It's not considered a home occupation or is it?
Bed and breakfast always had been since I worked here, and I believe it's still listed as the permitted use that is in occupation. So I don't know if that's not being done anymore, I don't know. Everybody voted on it for-
Well, under permitted uses, the requirements for a zoning permit is bed and breakfast. But it's non-residential.
Well, home occupation is the zoning permit.
We also have a non-residential zone.
Those are for properties that are residential, and they're not residential at all. So now that I've added this to the definition of short-term rental hosted, short-term rental hosted includes bed and breakfast. Do we have to add anything about how the meal is up to the owner? Or you just leave it?
Leave it right
And just leave it without.
So do you want to keep bed and breakfast, permitted uses, or if you want, if you're considering hosted short-term rental, the same category as the bed and breakfast, you would change that from bed and breakfast to call it short-term rental hosted.
Yes.
And then that would be allowed with the monthly. Is that what everybody wants to do?
Yes.
For required a special permit. Because short-term rental didn't say kind of short-term rental. So if you're allowing your hosted short-term rental, in permitted use with zoning permit. If you wanted to make it clear, you could say up here, back up to where it says short-term rental hosted, you could say that it requires a full application, if you wanted to make that clear.
Should we have, in this conversation, should we have unhosted require a special permit also or no?
That, I thought that's where you're going, since I was directed.
Well, I'm just trying, I'm going section by section. So. you just-
because an unposted. May not, it's not. I guess it could be your home, but if you're gone, you're in Florida 6 months and rent your house out. It's still. A home occupation, but I think it's gotta
Well, home
be there to
occupation
be a home
requires it
occupation.
there. It can't be,
So that's, okay, thank you. So that's right, so unposted would not be a home.
it sounds
occupation.
like the unhosted could invite the problem that you were worried about with the management company from God knows where, buying like a bunch of properties and then not using them as residents, but renting them out.
We could still do it.
Right, special purpose.
So we want to make this where it says it requires a special permit, to say it's the unhosted.
I don't think we have a permit like this, but would we have a permit to use it? Kind of as like a non-residential one, that way it doesn't stay with the property like a special permit does.
Well,
I don't think we have
that
that,
is,
but.
that's really kind of a topic for a much bigger discussion. I
Yeah.
think.
That's what I figured, but.
Not
No, it's good.
properties grandfather for non-residential uses, and then it's basically you tracking the term. Then your current zoning officer feels that that doesn't mean anything. And my point was, so imagine you don't require anything, and then it turns over from business A to business B, business C. And how do you know at some point that there's a difference, enough of a difference from any of those businesses to the new business to know that it needs a special permit? There was no record of what was there. It basically will go out west and
Yeah.
let them all do whatever they want. Except at some point, when something's big enough scale, suddenly you'll have a problem. Traffic issue, maybe waste management issues, lighting, and maybe if it's in one of these plaza kind of properties, they might overwhelm the space against all the other businesses. They're gonna take up all the parking. Because if no one's looking at these things, who knows what's going on?
I think that kind of was Dean said, you know, like the home occupation, it comes up for renewal in 5 years. If we do a special permit, we can't stop it.
So
After that,
what
once
you
we
might,
permit it, they're good. And if
if you might, in the future, kind of bigger discussion in short-term rentals. But the discussion of businesses, you might look at site plan review, where you still can look at it, you get a or site plan to look at. But I don't believe it comes to the limitations and questions. So we don't do site plan review with the zone application procedure, but that could change. And how you do business turnover, and we could do it differently than once in one. But your new zoning officer thinks that that isn't necessary. And I'm not a zoning officer, so it's not my problem. But I think as the former zoning officer for Woodstock, I don't know how you're supposed to know when something needs a special permit if no one's been tracking the turnover.
So you raise a very good point, and it's not for tonight's discussion, but it is an important point, I think, to somehow put in our regulations wording to make it clear to any CEO to the town. That that's going to be the requirement, that zoning permit is required as a business is changed. So that's a different discussion. I'd be curious to see where in our regulations that would be.
Agree.
But back to short-term rental, needing a special permit. You want it to be for the unhosted time?
That's what.
Unhosted, yes, it needs to be something other than a home occupation.
Right.
You're just not sure what it,
The other one.
right.
For the time
At this
being,
point.
would we even have to allow unhosted ones? So we could come up with something else to put in that's not like a special permit?
If you wanted to not allow them, you don't have to do that, but we wouldn't even have this whole section. All the stuff that I drafted based on Ashford, we wouldn't have that, because you don't want to require a special permit, you wouldn't even. You would just change what you have for bed and breakfast to include the. Part where you don't serve
Yeah.
meals. That's the difference, bed and breakfast and then hosting. Children rental.
So. Following that, that would preclude an Airbnb type facility residence. But assuming Airbnb is somebody,
They live there.
if somebody doesn't live there. So,
Because if they don't live there, so it's not hosted.
right,
So
which
But-
is what's occurring now.
if you don't want to allow for unhosted, I think you'd want to put in somewhere that it's clear that they're not allowed, so. I
Okay,
didn't draft that because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So under prohibited uses, you would add a section about how unhosted short-term rental. would
Okay.
be allowed.
So in answer to your question, currently, there is no.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not advocating for it to be anything permanent, that they can't. Just wrap something that fits it.
Rather than do a special permit now.
Yeah.
Until we get a better way to do it, so that we do a special permit now, that's it, you can't shut that down again. So it's just not allowed.
Yeah, it's not something I want.
That's
it's not
another one
something
of
I
our
wanna prohibit, I just wanted
immediate-
to.
high priority things is to come up with a new regulation, a new category.
which could be changed later to a site plan instead of a special permit if we develop language for a site plan.
Bigger discussion on how the whole process works. And how
Right.
it's different from a special permit. Because the other thing is if you're requiring a special permit for your short-term rental. Right now, a special permit requires the HU survey and. Or at least the survey, because if it's a huge property, you don't require the HU survey of say 100 acres. There's something about how it's limited to the project area.
Right.
But it's still, that's a lot. So.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of making a new process, you might have a list of things that are more. I don't know. Proportional to the. To the proposal, maybe special permit is a big scale thing that needs a lot of stuff to review. Maybe the site plan review is something more minor.
The second reason I was bringing that up is I think the special permits will be burdensome for something pretty simple as using a house as a house just for.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, on certain applications, you might want to have the health department or. You know, what are your setbacks, you know, your septic system sizes. You know, bedrooms, whatever.
Well, a septic system is designed based on the number of bedrooms. So
Right.
Providing you don't get more people staying in those bedrooms than what the septic system is sized for. I don't think that's probably gonna be very good with that. I'm not sure if zoning would regulate that, but maybe it could. I don't know, maybe. I don't have the language right now, but we can ask. But to be limited to how many people per bedroom, there is something in the Ashford example,
Yeah, it's kind of hard,
in the standards.
it's kind of hard to understand it.
I tried to make the most sense of it, I read it, it's still confusing.
Let my sliding rule home, so.
So, what do you want to do with this special permit thing? Right now I have added unhosted as needing a special permit, but if you don't want it that way, then you can either make a note that it's still debated or.
Well, this is all discussion right now, so
Yeah.
either asterisk or.
Can change
Yeah,
again.
well, you know,
Yeah,
some
maybe.
point, you're gonna make a text.
Right.
I'm honestly not opposed to outlawing unhosted rentals, so to speak.
Well, that'll be.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to that.
And we've got to the public comment period, it would be helpful to hear from the public about what these draft comments.
David's point that if we grant a special permit, then it can be forever. If you find another way around it to possibly have it, but kind of have it, foolproof. And like I said, I'm not opposed to outlawing, so to speak.
So in the Ashford example. It talks about how first permit issued filed within 1 year. After 1 year of compliance. It's short filed in 2 years, but now it's getting very complicated. So there is a limit on them that's not the same as how managed permits work. So we have to ask which part because that didn't make sense. I know special permits have changed somewhat in the recent years. But it's always been competing. So I don't know if you want to jump around, but if you go to the last page, number 4 on the last page. Time limit thing. So it's here at the top of the screen.
Yeah, so they have a different, they have a permit that expires. And then after the first year, it's you 2 years. We don't have,
And
Sergeant Schultz can take it away.
Joe Palula had given me the printout from Ashford, and he included an ordinance from Stonington. But the commission, I don't remember them saying, I don't remember you guys saying that you Stonington thing. That was also an ordinance. That was also an ordinance was done differently. But there was a bunch of stuff in the ordinance that I didn't think really made a lot of sense for this. So I limited to what I wrote based on Ashford and tried to fit it into where it made the most sense for this stuff. So I don't know if you want to consider this now, or we'll just go back to where we were and keep working our way down. We're gonna jump around a little bit. Topic came up.
we'll kind of keep going through it.
So we should come back to that. Go back to the subject of special permit. So right now you want to leave it as needing a special permit?
Pending future decision. Yes.
The comment from today is that there's no full consensus on there.
Can you add a comment about consider site plan?
Yeah.
Site plan review.
I know both Ashland and Stonington limit the number of people. Perfect.
Well, Ashford kind of does too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ashford's regulation kind of applies it. College kids.
Dave, would you explain the site plan review in principle?
I haven't had it, because Woodstock doesn't have it,
Right,
and that's where I worked for quite a number of years.
Okay.
I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe a public hearing is required, and in different, slightly different process. I don't think you have the perhaps what might be called flexibility with a special permit.
Right.
That you would have a site plan review. But
Okay.
it's supposed to be an easier, quicker review,
And the special permit process.
I think.
So we've got, is it, so it's a review, but is that a permit or? it's-
You review it, and then if you approve it, then get the permit.
Okay, so it would still be a special, I mean, it'd be a special permit?
No, it's called a site plan review,
Okay,
it's a different process.
And then is it going to be attached to the lot?
oh, okay.
So that has to get renewed every so often.
The definition of site plan review means permit process that establishes criteria for the layout, scale, appearance, safety, and environmental impacts of a proposed development to ensure conformance to city standards and criteria.
And where's the definition come from?
I just Googled it. No, but he was asking in general, so that is, it is a permit process. That's what I'm saying. It's from Law Insider. The legal plan definition.
Amy, thank you very much for your input. I love you. I tell my kids all the time, they say, what does that mean? I said, you have an encyclopedia at your fingertips, look it up. They can explain it way better than me. You just have to go over there on the shelf and look it up. You know, it was today. Take some comments from the public, if any of you would like to speak. Ladies before gentlemen, how's that? If you state your name for the record.
Erin Yansar, 33 Hiawatha Heights, with South Valley.
Thank you
I
for
don't
coming.
want-
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having. And I want to say that I appreciate the depth to which you guys are going to define things. The process is fascinating and awesome. I have frequented short-term rental probably most of my life. I grew up in Connecticut. We used to go on vacation to New Hampshire. We went on vacation to Massachusetts. We would go for 2 weeks and rent a cottage. I rented my house for 2 weeks. At the beginning of COVID, it allowed me to get out of where I was. I rented it for 2 more weeks. I rented it for another month. And then the owner actually called me one day and said, we're moving to Virginia. Are you interested in buying a house? So I went to an Airbnb last week in Iowa, in a 4,000 person town, Forest City, Iowa, for a music festival, country music festival. I've used Airbnbs everywhere. Not always Airbnb, VRBO, Home Away. I think the first time I kind of remember doing it on my own was I rented a condo in Florida in college for spring break. So I realized that a lot of this is around, oh my God, there's gonna be people tearing stuff apart and number of people per room and all that. Like, we're all envisioning the worst case scenario that we want to prevent, right? And if we were all lawyers, we would all be getting paid a lot more money than you're doing that. In my mind, I think about it of like, my niece goes to UConn. Last year, I gave my house to her roommate's parents because their other child was graduating and we couldn't find a place to stay. And I left and I went and stayed with friends and her family came and stayed at my house. Would I have liked to have monetized that a little bit? Sure, they bought me nice gift certificate to Elizabeth farmhouse, that was lovely. But like, I just think of it as where we are and that we live in vacation land and it's about at least offsetting some costs to do that. I completely agree with the, you know, we don't want a company coming in and buying up 10 houses anywhere and like turning this into a corporate rental playground. But it might be my fault that I tend to try and see the good in people. And I just think of it as we live in a beautiful place. There's a lot of people who have weddings here. A lot of people who just want to come and look at leaves for a week. When I lived in California, I believe made sure I came home in October because I missed it. So I think that those are the people who are renting for a week at a time or a weekend at a time, and there's a way of, you know, these rental platforms having regulations themselves. I mean, right now, if you have a party, you are kicked off on any of them. Because what was happening during COVID was people couldn't have their wedding at a wedding factory spot because they stopped gathering. So people were looking for private gatherings. So many regulations have been put in place by all of these companies that people use to advertise. That's the other thing is the internet has just changed the way we advertise, right? Everyone here has been listing with realtors or putting a print ad or doing it a different way. We're just looking at that now we can advertise it differently and now we can process the payment easier. So all of those platforms that exist that help that process, the ones that have paired those two things up, have lots of rules in place to make sure that nobody has a big party. And if they do, they are fined up the wazoo, the owner is fined, like everybody's just in trouble. I appreciate that we all want to keep out the giant, huge party. When I first moved into my house, there were UConn students across the lake. And it was like electronic disco every Friday night. It was just and so I like the idea of people being able to help offset their costs and not have to rent to UConn students, because the off-season aspect of things is a lot of short-term rental that can help. Otherwise, then you're like, okay, do I rent to a UConn student for 4 months to help me pay my taxes and whatever? And then to me, the 4 months of UConn students are way worse than like a family coming to see their kid graduate from UConn. So that's sort of where I put the divider line in my head. And I've had an Airbnb. I would like to offset my costs, but I'll be completely transparent. I'm not turning it into a complete 100%, you know, I'm not a company, but I travel a lot, travel a ton for work. You know, it'd be nice every once in a while, UConn graduation weekend, Woodstock Academy graduation weekend, October, when I'm done with speaking, to have that help and to be able to do that. And I think that ultimately a bad owner should be penalized. But I don't think we should prevent people from at least trying. And I think that the penalty should certainly meet the lack of being a good host. If you're a good host, you know, it's the same way that Airbnb, that eBay works, right? We all buy stuff off eBay. Somebody's got 5 stars, somebody doesn't, somebody's slow to ship, somebody's, you know, slow to bad refund or whatever that is. Those rating systems that are public rating systems, Yelp, they all exist to help us make better judgments about who we're talking to or who we're gonna rent to, whether it be a family, it would be one person. You know, when I in California, when I did have an Airbnb, I let dogs come, and people loved me because I let dogs come because I had a dog, and so many places wouldn't allow dogs. What did I do? I just held a bigger deposit, and if somebody's dog ruined the rug, I had $150 to buy the rug. Wasn't the end of the world. So I appreciate all the dialogue, and I just always like to try and remind people that not everybody in the world is gonna throw a giant party and ruin life for the rest of us.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your comments. You bring up some good points. It's a tough issue for ourselves. Trying to get through it and not ruin it. Or it won't get happening. Tell me what's next. Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Jose Macho. I live on Beaver Dam Road in Woodstock.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you. So a couple things. You use the term homeowners when you're discussing short-term rentals. In today's market, there isn't a homeowner. It's an LLC. The property is bought by investment people solely for the purposes of income property. And that you can it's well documented, and if you read online where the market is, not just for Greenville, for everybody else. It's a business because it's extremely profitable and everybody's getting into it. With that said, these LLCs or property owners don't live in the community, nor do they care about the community. Their interest is gaining as much. So do they vet the prospective guests or whatever we choose to call them, or tenants or renters? No, they want to get it rented. They want to keep it rented as long as they can. And that has resulted in a lot of problems on many lakes and other properties. If you look at Ashford, for example, I've researched 10 to 15 communities in Connecticut with existing short-term rental laws. I've done my homework. We look at Ashford, their last annual meeting notes clearly stated 3 of the lakefront properties were purchased by rental businesses, period. They're not here to spend some time having a backyard conversation, just get it rented. We don't care who comes in here. So that's just something to keep in mind with perspective. The whole market has changed dynamically. It's not the individual homeowner who like to rent it out and make a little money. They're all being scoffed up at a low rate. And if you're in a real estate business, the antenna is already up for Ashford. It's an easy town to get into. There's a lot of revenue to be made on properties that are purchased there. A couple of other things I just want to mention. Some of them use 30 days. That's kind of a standard. Most of the community, for whatever reason, and it's either occupied or non-occupied. That's simply how most towns have defined it in their rules and regulations. On permits is a very important issue. How do you prevent someone with a 1,000 square foot house from renting it out to 15 people or 20 people in a house that may only have 2 bedrooms, may have an inadequate septic and well system to support that? So many of the communities in the permitting process have gone multiple steps to the point where in Westbrook, but many of them on a shoreline communities, especially, there's a high rentals community services down to square footage, how many occupants per square foot, all the health and fire and safety regulations required. Parking is a big thing, all of that. And most importantly is public safety. How do we get a fire truck back there or a police car when there's a party going on and the street's blocked? So my point is that it's become a very difficult and very unmanageable business per se. And God forbid the person who lives next door to a property who has to live with, who knows what the next week's tenants are going to be like. This week's good, next week, who knows? So just some things to keep in mind about it. But, we could go into a lot more of it. There are quite a few other municipalities that I would encourage. I gave Dan Malo a list of 10 of them with all the regs that they had posted online to kind of go through that. I have that. I'd be happy to share that information again with any of you if you'd like to just peruse and go through and see how some of the other communities are managing it. But it's becoming a real difficult situation, and I think for many communities, a challenge to how do we manage this? How can we control this? So I'm happy to lend any support as well if you could use some of my research documentation or such to be of assistance. But thank you.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate your input.
I just had a question. You said some towns use occupied versus unoccupied. Did you mean owner occupied or owner unoccupied?
No, because you don't know who the owner is. It could be an LLC, it could be a business, it could be a corporation.
But-
Occupied meaning typically the property owner or an agent of some representative is on the premise at all times. Unoccupied means he's not. The response time issue was driven by public safety by many communities because they get into these rowdy party situations. And who do we call to get these people out of the house? So they put a response time in there so that the police department can work with whoever is managing or owns the property. So a lot of them arbitrarily put a 2 hour or something in there, but that was done specifically for the parties and for how do we handle all these unruly guests? We got to get them out of here. Thank you. Again.
Thank you. Your name, please.
I totally appreciate, where you're coming from, the anticipation of the scenario, that you described is frightening. I get it, I support your interpretation of that. On the other hand, I really.
State your name for the record, please. Thank you.
And being starting my 5th year, and we have a rating system, and I'm proud to say I have a 5-star rating with my Airbnb. I wish people can make rules and regulations that will never put the line of principle force. When people request to stay at my home, I make sure I let them know that I live there. I can tell by the way they're wording it. They're looking, what's your home available? So please read the whole description. I'm upstairs and then all of a sudden they come take me up. So it's a pretty well given, there's pictures of the site. And I've been hosting a lot of people, mostly professionals, presidents, pastors, lawyers, all types of professional people. And just today, for the people that are in my home right now, just thank me for sharing the beauty of my phone. It is a gift to people. It's my pleasure. I'm a retired nurse for 40 years. This is an extension of my ability to use people skills. And if there was a possibility of your fears, I get it. I mean, I would hate to see Lake Harmony be put in that position. So I would hope that you folks could, keep some type of tab on who you're allowing to come in as a business investor. Yeah, the permit issue would kind of cover all of this from happening. So I think, as Erin was saying, I have people that are on the board at conference school, like UConn, presidents of organizations stay at my property because they're in town to go to special meetings. Yeah, they know to come there. And that's the reason I would do it. There's no way in creation that I would subject my home, which I keep very nicely and proud of it, to what Jose is saying. I get where it's coming from. I would hate to see that happen to me. Yeah, we're not an LLC. I just supplement my income with other nurse. And it's not a business, it helps me to get by. And for 5 years has now it's been a blessing. I can understand his position and the fear. Mike came over and actually apologized that he started this when he met me, because he had the incident. So, I just hope that we could all as a community be leery of what your fears are. I get that and I respect that, but I also respect what I'm doing, and I'm glad you folks are able to, to kind of categorize. And I don't make breakfast. I would what is suggested. I think I'm not. This is a very simple thing, and I endorse all the venues in our town. I suggested go there. I've sent a lot of business to a lot of places, and so it's working for everybody in a very respectable fashion. So again, I respect his position, but I respect mine as well, and I will hold it up to the heights. And roll up.
Thank you. I'm gonna speak for the commission. I think we all agree that what you're doing is accepted thing or within the limits or very controlled. That was part of why we all unanimously allow you to keep doing what you've been doing. Say says it's the other people that we corporations or the LLCs that it's a business. Not that it isn't a business to you, but it's not your main business, and you're there and you control it, you know, so how do we find a fine line of being able to keep it under control and make everybody happy and so everybody can't always be happy. Thank you.
My pleasure.
If I could just ask, since you're interested, could you just keep following whatever drafts, regulations are proposed? Because you heard there will be a public comment period. So I'd be interested, because I know there are a lot of places around town that are kind of unregulated, that just have housing, and some of that works fine, but with the issues that came up on like fungi and a growing concern. These regulations, I think, are important, but I want to make sure that people who are going to have to abide by them, to understand them and see if they work.
Comment on that, the documents were not accessible. So I tried to click into the documents from the link that was on the main page. And they weren't, the draft regulations and everything were not acceptable. So we tried twice this week.
There's been a turnover in the staff, so maybe someone didn't upload the document that and I apologize, they did send it out yesterday. So,
Just to let you know, it wasn't there.
And we'll try and make sure
Thank you.
more readily available.
Yep, just take, yeah.
Kathleen Ellison, if you'd like to speak now. Kathleen Ellison, if you'd still like to speak. You just have to unmute yourself.
Hi, it's Ross Ellison, 123 Laurel Hill Drive, Woodstock, Lake Bungay. We purchased our house on Lake Bungay, and it's a private lake. I don't see how this Airbnbs, whatever you guys decide to call it, is gonna keep us private. I'm concerned with being able to police the events if and when they get or do get out of hand. And the people who do the work on the lake is private, mostly unpaid. Some spots are paid, but who's going to do the work when it gets out of hand, when people lose interest in it, if it gets out of hand? And I think if people really wanted to just supplement their income a handful of times a year would offset their property taxes. They wouldn't have to do it to the extent that it was becoming a business, or to the extent that it's being done at in some locations. Yeah, when then, like I was saying, go ahead, excuse me.
Continue.
Okay, I was looking at my notes, excuse me. Like I was saying, I'd like to know who was gonna do the work if the community gets sick of it, it gets out of hand. I don't know how that would work out. And then, is there any way that something like this could be done and be removed, done in the town, and be removed from the taxing districts? That was it.
What work are you referring to?
The work to maintain the roads, the beaches, the lake, the dam, all that kind of work. If it becomes so commercialized that no one wants to be bothered doing it, because people do it because it's private and there's ownership in it. Once that is gone, if that goes away, who's going to do the work? Is it going to end up on the town along with the policing?
I don't want to get too far off topic, but they're private roads and they were not constructed to the standards the subdivision regulations have for a town road. So it would be very difficult to get those roads to be approved as town roads. There would be a whole procedure that you would have to go through, or somebody would have to go through to get a private road approved as a town road. So it would be very difficult. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but the road has to be constructed to the right standard, and then someone would have to appeal to the Board of Selectmen to get the road approved. accepted as a town road for it to become maintained by the town.
Roads already exist. So your subdivision regulations are for new roads that are gonna be constructed in subdivisions. They're not for existing roads already.
No, but if you
And
were
as
wanting
it
to,
stands, the town already maintains certain private roads on certain lakes and towns.
well, I wasn't aware of that, so thank you for sharing with me, but it's my understanding to get a private road approved as a town road, there's a whole procedure you have to go through.
Correct.
And I believe the selectmen would most likely want it to be upgraded to the current standard for a road. So I can't speak for them, they may disagree, but I remember there was a private road on a subdivision that someone came to me about wanting to get it approved as a town road, because they didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I checked into the procedure then. So that's when I found out that not only would they have to show the town that it met all the current standards, but they would have to convince the selectmen and maybe through a town vote to approve it as a town road. Because once you do a subdivision road, even if after you constructed it, and it would have to be constructed to the standard that was approved in the subdivision, you still have to go through the procedure to get that road approved.
Correct. But it's also bounded too.
Is there anything else, Mr. Ellison?
Well, that would be how complicated that conversation just was, would be my point, that if no one was going to do it as a volunteer, someone would have to be doing it. I would assume that would be the town, just like if a water department becomes a water service no longer takes care of it, the next local place has to take care of it. I would think that that would be a potential problem for our, for the whole community, for everybody that lives in Woodstock.
You bring up a great point. I have to agree. It could be a big issue.
Yeah, if somehow we go belly up, any association goes belly up, the town would own them, I would assume. I don't know. I'm just saying, if this becomes such a big issue that people don't volunteer, don't do the work, people that do the work move out, then who's gonna do the work? That was my only point. Thank you.
I have one more question, ask if I can, Kathleen Ellison. So currently houses that are being used as Airbnbs here on the lake are only approved for a 2-bedroom house. They currently have a 3rd bedroom, but the septic's not approved for that. How would the town monitor or make sure that these waterfront lots that are hosting Airbnbs, septics can handle the additional people which they weren't approved for? Would there be a mechanism in the lake area for doing that? Or could the lake area be completely carved out from this, or stricter regulations? Because this is a private lake. All these people are coming in here with a credit card, paying their fee and using everything that we're all paying extra taxes for. And a potential septic issue is a real concern when the house is not approved for a 3 or 4 bedroom house, but that's how it's being used.
For not knowing the answer correctly, Delia maybe can shed some light on it. My suggestion would be, if you know of somebody that has a 2-bedroom house, using it as a 3-bedroom house, maybe you contact the lake association to begin. Delia, you have a.
The local planning and zoning commission and the zoning regulations doesn't regulate waste disposal and septic systems. So you'd have to go through the Northeast District Department of Health. So anytime someone wants to put in a septic system, or if they need to repair one, or if there's some problem with it, that's the agency that has to review it, because they're the ones that enforce the public health code. So if there's a concern about an overburdened system, that's the place that we would call the Northeast District Department of Health. And in terms of how many people are using the property, zoning doesn't get involved in that. I'm not sure. Now, if there was a regulation specifically about short-term rentals, it may be drafted so that it could specify how many people would be allowed to use a property. We haven't finished this discussion yet, so that might be part of it. I think there's something in the draft that was taken from Ashford that has to do with that sort of thing. And if it's in the zoning regulations, then the zoning officer has to enforce it.
So that's the loophole though, right? So unless there's an actual septic that is overflowing, Northeast won't come out and look at it. And the other thing is, I mean, we're a private lake with rules, regulations, deeds and covenants, and people are just coming in and using it by using a credit card. So there should be some consideration for lake districts that maybe they're not allowed, or they're a very short period of time they can do it and not, I mean, we're all on top of each other here. As you know, the lots are very small. And it's really not good when you have somebody next to you that's partying all weekend, or we have people coming in and using our lake and our beaches that don't live here. They're not vested in our community. The homeowner having the Airbnb is not out on the lake with them or on the beaches like they're required to be. So it would be great if your commission could take lake districts into a special consideration, giving all of our septic systems, our wells, and all being on top of each other, and it being private. We just, it would be nice to have some consideration about lake district being different than what the rest of the community is doing, because we are very different from the rest of the community.
So you just covered a whole bunch of stuff. See if I can remember some of the things. The Lake District as an association can decide for themselves if they want to have different rules that are beyond what the zoning regulations are. The town would not enforce those, but they have that opportunity to do that, and they would have to seek their own methods for enforcement. In terms of zoning, the Lake District is a zone, just like the community districts. And currently the uses, I believe, are the same for both districts. If someone wanted to propose an amendment, they could propose a text amendment to change the uses, or the uses that are permitted versus the uses that are allowed with a special permit in each of the zones. You know, text amendment could be done. That's not what we're talking about here, but that's possible.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. One more. Police station.
Joan Rivers. I'm hearing a lot of things. Like I said, we've been doing this for years. When we applied for the bed and breakfast, which is completely inappropriate now, since you guys are going for this. There is a permit. The permit has certain applications. If you, Pete Thurlow went through our application. I'm trying to think who was, 20 years ago, the guy who ran the town and, approved the building of our home. It was actually a 3-bedroom. Then how it ever got transferred into the rules of a 2-bedroom, I don't know, but there was always 3 bedrooms. He always, Terry Bellman, I couldn't think of his name. He came there, he knew the fireplace was going in downstairs, he knew what was going in downstairs, he knew what was on the upper 2 levels. And I talked to Peter Thurlow about it, and he said, you have absolutely no problem. We have an engineered septic system. There is, and probably stretches as wide as this room. There's nothing, let them come out and test it. If you have questions about something, let them come and test it. There's nothing going in the lake. We have a working permit with Airbnb. We never have a maximum of 4 people there, including children. And nobody has parties. We have our own private beach. Yes, I don't see any problem with them taking a little kid over if they're a little apprehensive about swimming in that water. What violations are we having? And if they're concerned about the roads, get 1 car. When my kids come there, they bring 4 or 5 cars. So that's my family. If there is something that you want to regulate, put it in the permit. And have somebody, instead of going and knocking on everybody's door every week, have somebody come out every 6 months and say, well, we'd like to know, was your septic pumped? How bad was it? What's going on here? How many people, how many recommendations do you have? And see what's going on. That's what permits are for, aren't they?
I'm not mistaken, that's one of the Lake District's regulation, you have to have a septic pump every 3 years.
Exactly, and we're in compliance.
You have to turn a report into them.
Yeah.
I'm guessing somewhere between I don't think it was Terry Bowman's fault, I think it was whoever installed the septic system or the Department of Health somehow, Department of Health regulates the septic system, whether it got built for a 2-bedroom or. Right, I'm speaking out of turn off the top, but I think that Peter's an installer, he knows,
God, well, I'm in real estate, so I've known Peter for many years.
think that.
Tony,
If he wanted to make it a 3-bedroom, he probably could engineer it to, and get the permit to.
he just has to call me 2 or 3 times. He goes, I can do it.
Question, what is this thing about the 2 bedrooms? I reviewed zoning permits for the entire time I was a zoning officer. I don't remember there being a limit for 2 bedrooms lake. I think there are probably many houses that I approved that met zoning that probably were not 2 bedrooms. They may have been more than 2 bedrooms. I'm not aware of any, at least any zoning limitations to 2 bedrooms. Maybe there was
It's a 5,000 square foot house. So 2 bedrooms is.
No, but
it's-
where is this coming from?
It's on the call. It's on the town card. Unfortunately. But I never did anything about it because Terry knew the bedroom was going in downstairs.
And
We just hadn't put the sheetrock and stuff up downstairs where it was. So whoever came and did a drive-by to check out the house just did that. I just never bothered to go make a big stink about it.
thank you. We want to build back into regulations. We happy with where we're at now.
You wanna continue or are we done for the evening or what?
Be done. I'm okay to be done.
I'll second that.
What I would like is maybe just this wrap with the changes that you've made and maybe one color, just less busy.
You like my color?
Well, the colors are very pretty, but it's.
Trying to show that as time goes on, so they keep track in case you don't
Sure.
look at change that happens on June 1st, if we're like 3 meetings from now, we make like. Scrap all that garbage and we go back to what we had before that. But I can change it and then label the document itself as June 1st. If you want. It'll just be red and black.
Okay.
And that way you know what's new and what's supposed to be deleted. Red and white.
Good, thank you.
And I apologize, it wasn't online. I did just finish it yesterday, but there was a turnover to staff at the Northern. Maybe. No, it's a good plan, and I don't have access to this. I'll try to make sure I send it to someone else.
I don't.
You can email me directly if you want.
Yeah, then I was mowing this morning, you're gonna see.
What?
When I was mowing this morning, you're gonna see what he committed. For that
I was here at 2 o'clock or so.
I don't know what they're saying.
The sign said be back at 1, so. The next item on the agenda is review of home occupation permits, and best of my knowledge, we don't have any to review. If there are any that wasn't brought to my attention, so. That brings us to agenda item B11. I have it from David. Would you like to second it, Mark?
I'll second.
I'll go through the roll call. Doug, I'll start with you. To adjourn.
He wants to say.
I move to adjourn. I'll vote yes to adjourn.
Steve, thank you. Steve, can you hear us?
I can. I second that or vote in favor of it.
David? Aye. I'll vote aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. It's unanimous. I have line 20. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question. Hey, look at the chairman tonight.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Amy, do we have to break down the room?
I don't know.